Steph Blue, and this is another episode of Outside Opinions. And today we have my friend Anna Perales, who's been in radio for how long?
Over 25 years?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I thought you had like maybe over 5 years more than me, at least over 5 years more than me.
Well, it was 2 weeks shy of 23 years in Peoria. And then I had other jobs outside of Peoria in Minnesota. So it was roughly around 25 years.
Wow. And then you got out of it in what year?
2 years ago. Exactly.
Okay. Nice. And how's it been since you've been out of radio?
Amazing.
Well, the thing is, a lot of people don't understand that women deal with a lot more in radio than men tend to deal with.
True.
Yeah. So it's been, I've seen a lot of women getting out of radio lately. And I think you were kind of the first one who really was like in the area that was like, I'm done. And then all of us were like, you know what? We don't have to deal with this. So maybe we're done too.
I know. I kicked off a trend. I'm a trendsetter.
You totally are. Yeah. Because I got out probably, it was a few months after you did.
Yeah. Several people left the business in Peoria right after I left. And I keep seeing more and more people leaving.
So that brings up a big, obviously this podcast is all about trying to get people's opinions outside and inside. So you're both, you're outside and inside, since you've been in and out of radio, on the state of radio. Now, this is a very general question. Where do you feel like radio is heading right now?
I feel like there's just so much, there's too much corporate control. And I think like the smaller markets like Peoria have just become obsolete. They just don't care about them. They care about the Chicagos and the Minneapolises and I would like to say St. Louis, but I just saw St. Louis fired a bunch of their air talent lately. So I feel like the focus is more on the bigger cities than these smaller markets, when the smaller markets I feel are even more important and more of a face and more of a friend to the listeners in these smaller markets. And they seem to be the ones that are being ignored and pushed to the side. I've even seen some of these smaller markets lately where the big corporations have just shut them down.
Yeah. Yeah. Whole stations.
Insane.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're just like, oh, no, we're not going to broadcast anymore.
Well, one of my favorite, I know you know her, Lux from St. Louis. She is one of my favorite on-air talents. I would watch her before I would do interviews, just because she is what she is. She doesn't have an on-air personality and then an off-air personality. It is what it is. And when she got out, I was like, oh, man, that broke my heart. But luckily she went back in. She's just in a different market. But yeah, so I feel like everybody's kind of feeling the push, and I'm not sure exactly where to pinpoint. I know why I left, and I talked about it. I know why you left, and we've talked about that. But it seems like as much as AI is starting to scare people, I feel like it's helping alleviate some of the stress of all of the hats that we ended up having to wear at the end, towards the end. I mean, we were doing all of it. We weren't just being on air. We were doing all of it. So I feel like AI is kind of helping alleviate some of that, and maybe helping, I don't know, the atmosphere in radio a little bit. Again, I haven't been in 2 years, but I still talk to a lot of my friends still. So I have hopes, because unlike you, I do miss being on air. I do miss it a little bit. But not everybody.
You still have outlets.
Exactly. Like, I love doing this, all the things that I've been doing with all of the other kind of behind the scenes. I love the behind the scenes stuff. I don't know if I'll ever go back to on air again. Would you ever do behind the scenes kind of stuff, like writing, producing podcasts, that kind of thing?
No, I love what I'm doing now.
Yeah, you don't have time for it.
I don't. I am busy. I am way more stressed out than what I was in radio, but it's a good stress. Like, I'm just so happy with where I'm at now and what I'm doing now. And I feel like radio was that launching pad to where I'm at. It definitely prepared me for a lot of what I deal with today. And the creativity of it has also helped with what I'm doing today too. So, I mean, it was a huge stepping stone in that leap pad for me to be where I'm at now.
And do you feel comfortable saying what you do? You don't have to say the city, just like generalization what you do.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm a public information officer for a state's attorney's office. A lot of media people get into those roles. I think in our area locally, you'll notice pretty much every public information officer, whether it's for the police department, the highway department, even the medical facilities, they're all former either TV or radio personalities.
Yeah, when I got out, Josh actually joked, "Are you going to, the local hospital? So are you going to go work for them and do public relations?" I was like, "No. First of all, there's no job openings. But second, no. I would if there was. I think that's really interesting." Do you ever listen to the radio?
Very rarely. If I do, I went to the dark side and I listen to Sirius XM.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
So I'm more of a satellite radio when it's radio.
Okay.
But as far as local radio, I haven't listened to it. It's very rare. We have it on at work, but it's literally just background noise at work. So I can't really say it's something that I'm listening to or paying attention to.
Right. I think I definitely tuned in recently when we had those tornadoes come through and I was driving to get the kids. I turned it on to one of the stations I was actually on before, just because I know that they're constantly giving updates. So I definitely tuned in for that. And I think that's a big push for local radio is I'm not going to get that from, I can't watch my phone while I'm driving.
Right.
I'm not going to get that from like XM. And it was important. I actually was getting really good updates while I was going to get the kids and battling principals to let me take my child. But that's another story. But yeah.
Right. So I think that's the great thing about local radio is you still can have that. It can go with you everywhere. I know in our office, when the tornadoes came through, the radio was turned up into the office, and that's what people were paying attention to. And we even had TVs in the office. So people were still listening to the radio with the TVs on. And, that's one of the things that I think is hurting the group that I left, because they moved their studios to a town that's 45 minutes away.
Yeah.
You can't talk about what's physically happening in your town when you're broadcasting from a city that's 45 minutes away. You can't look out the window and see what's happening. You can't talk about if hail is happening or it's thundering, lightning. You can't do that. And that was a huge red flag for me. How can we be local when we are 45 minutes away from the city that we're catering to?
Yeah, that's a very true point. I was going to ask you about that, but I'll talk to you about that after the podcast, because when that move was made and I talked to, some of the other people, I was a little because I thought they were going across the street from where we used to be, which made sense. And then they made the move down the highway. And so that's a whole other topic, but
I mean, you can't talk about when the snow starts. You can't talk about when the rain starts, or if it's hailing, or if there's high winds. I mean, it's just, I'm still perplexed on that decision.
And I'm wondering if that came from corporate. Like you said, corporate's running.
It did.
Yeah. So they're not even here. They're just like, oh, those studios look nicer, so let's do that instead.
They're so close together. Let's just combine them and save money. And I'm just like, wow, you're hurting your city that you're catering to.
So if you were in charge, let's say they were like, okay, we want to give you a station and what would you do to make it like the best station you could think of? What would you do?
I think more variety in music. I noticed the station I left is still playing the same music it's been playing for 20 years. And that's one of the big reasons I don't listen. I get it that the average listener is only listening for that short window and you want to play the hits, but I feel like even your recurrence in your older music, it needs to have a bigger variety instead of the same stuff over and over and over again. Like one of the things when I scheduled music, I would notice the songs that I played in the 2:00 hour are the next day's 3:00 hour music. And I'm like, you can't do that. It's just, it gets boring and it's the same stuff. And so I would definitely make a music library deeper. I would get rid of the national contests. I think those serve absolutely no service. It's so hard to reward your local audience with a national contest. Yeah, $1,000, $10,000. It's flashy, it's cool, but you're very rarely rewarding your listeners. I mean, we did have winners with our national contest.
Oh, sure.
but it didn't happen very often.
Mm-mm.
There's just no reward. Even like, I think there was this thing where they were doing like $100 every hour. I mean, still, even that, there's so many prizes given away, and we would be lucky if we would have one local winner from our market.
Yeah, that's true.
There's no reward to the listeners in those national contests. I would get rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the two things that come to mind right away.
No, that's huge. That's a lot of things that people don't think about. And listeners aren't stupid. So if they have the radio on all day and they're hearing the music all day, they're going to know, like you said, the 3 o'clock hour is now the 2 o'clock hour for the next day.
Yep.
They're going to know, okay, well, those songs, it's repetitive every single day. It's just getting like switched an hour down. And the music libraries are so vast. I never understood why can't we open that more?
Right.
So yeah, I agree. That's a huge thing. Do you have like a really good memory about radio?
I mean, I have a lot of small memories. I think probably meeting some of my favorite artists.
Mm-hmm.
You know, people that I love their music. I can listen to their albums all the time. Jared Leto and Incubus come to mind the most. I mean, meeting those two artists and the people whose art and craft have been moments of your life. That's probably one of the coolest things about my time in radio is doing that.
Yeah. And you've done a lot with St. Jude, a ton. You got really close with the family too, in particular. And I remember that made me emotional. I can't imagine what it was like for you, but you did so much for St. Jude too.
Yeah. And I still do. So that did definitely afford a lot of possibilities for me of being able to go to tour the hospital numerous times, meeting the family that I still run for to this day. It also led to heartbreaking moments where, that girl passed away and going to her funeral, seeing other listeners pass away. Those are hard moments. People that you've known that have followed you, come to all your events, called into your radio station, and then just one day they're gone. I mean, that's a hard part, but it's a blessing knowing that you built these relationships just because of what you do.
And that's what made you, I mean, I will say this, you're a living legend in the area. Everybody knows who you are. And it's true though, because you've made those connections, whether you tried to or not. You've been so open on air, and I think that's what makes such a good on-air talent is the fact that they think that they know you. So they can come up and be like, hey, what's going on? And as scary as it is, I think sometimes they're like, hey, so how's so-and-so? And you're like, I have no idea who you are. What's going on? But yeah, you are so good at that. It's so good at opening yourself up. And it's a loss not having you on air, I think, in the area. But I love that you're doing what you're doing and you're happy again. And you don't have to deal with the BS, but hopefully that ends now with all of this other things that we're implementing in radio. But a couple other things I wanted to ask too. Let's say Sirius doesn't exist. What other platforms are you listening to for music?
I'm an Apple Music person.
Yeah, so many people are. Yep.
I'm not like the Spotify or any of those. I'm pretty Apple Music, and I love my Apple Music. So
I haven't gotten into that. What is the big, like, Cassie that I interviewed too? She's very into Apple. So what's the big pull for Apple Music?
Well, what I like with it is I can just type into the search what I'm looking for. So right now I have a injury, which was caused from a bad running stride. And I had a running analysis done, and they were like, what's going to fix your problem is increasing your cadence. And the most effective way to increase your cadence is to run with the music at a certain BPM.
Okay.
My BPM is 180.
Okay.
All I have to do is type in 180 beats per minute running playlist and pop.
No way.
Tons of music for me. That is what it is that I'm looking for. And then, like, the more you listen to it, Apple starts suggesting playlists and stations. And so you just really just open up your music library, and there is all this stuff already for you where it saves the search time.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I love it.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to add about like your thoughts on radio now and maybe why you got out of radio or what would make you like radio again?
I mean, I still like radio. I think there's always going to be a place for it. If these corporations start catering to the people that made them money to begin with instead of their shareholders and stockholders, I think they need to go back to their basics where they valued talent. Because I have noticed in my years of radio, when they started cutting staff, it was always talent that got cut.
Yeah.
And talent is the one that brings your listeners in. Talent is the one that connects your audience. Talent is the one that keeps people listening. Like you said, you develop these relationships and people listen to you and they like you. They're the ones that are out on the street meeting these people face to face. They're the ones giving them the concert tickets or the t-shirts or having a beer with them or emceeing a pageant or something. I think if radio got back into valuing their talent a little bit more instead of being the ones that are cut, absolutely paying them better.
Yeah.
Maybe
one
equal
pay between men and women. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just an idea.
Yeah. Well, that was one of many reasons why I left. I mean, there were several reasons why I left. That was one. I found out I was the lowest paid person on staff. And I had been there for 23 years, and somebody who was there for 5 was making almost 10 grand more than me.
Wow. It's wild. And I think that's why a lot of women are getting out of radio. I'm just trying to get ideas for this podcast. I have asked, what do you like listen to the radio anymore? What would make you want to listen to the radio again? And a lot of them were saying, even guys were saying, I'd like to hear more girls on the radio. I want to hear more women on the radio. I feel like it's mostly men now. And it's true. And there's reasons why, though.
Well, and what's sad with radio is you don't have young talent coming into the industry anymore. I know when we had always been looking for staff, we were wanting to bring in new talent, and you only get better in talent because there is no young talent coming into the industry anymore. And with social media and how vital it is to every job, every industry, no matter where you work or what you do, social media is vital. And your young generation is the one that understands social media and knows how to work it. So I think getting that young talent in is vital to the survival of it. And I know it's always going to be needed, like you said, with weather, particularly traffic, those type of things. So young talent is another huge thing that they need to bring in. And yes, obviously women, it's a male dominant industry. Let's get rid of the sidekicks and let a woman run the show.
I mean, yeah, there's this article or this group that I follow. They do women in radio type of printout, or I guess like research every quarter. And this time around, they did, how many people are in sales managing positions, how many people are in like upper positions. And I responded with, how about we talk about pay? Are those women getting paid as much as the guy before them? Did you guys look into that? And I mean, nobody had an answer for that because nobody wants to. That would open a whole can of worms, I think, if we ended up really taking a deep dive into that. So,
when I found out I was the least paid, I asked for a raise, and I got the runaround for 6 months, saying that the best way to get me the raise was through budget. I told them I was going to quit if I didn't get it. And it was, I was told it was approved, but not for what I asked for, but they never told me how much it was approved for, which tells me it was probably just maybe a couple thousand, which still kept me as the lowest paid person on staff. But it just so happened at that time I had already had a job offer. So I gave my notice like a day later. Yeah, it was great. I got told that my raise was approved on a Wednesday, but not for how much. On Thursday, I was offered the job that I'm at now. And then on the Friday is when I accepted the job and quit.
It doesn't make any, you gotta prove it. It's a secret. We're not going to tell you how much.
I was like, oh, great. It got approved. How much is it for? And he was like, oh, I don't remember. I have it written down. I'll look and I'll tell you. And he never told me.
What?
Yeah. And then here's what makes it even worse. They never instituted it because I put in my resignation.
Wow.
So even my final 3 weeks, they still didn't give me the extra pay that I was supposedly was approved for.
Unreal. And people don't understand this is what we're dealing with behind the scenes. So this is like supposed to be about outside opinions, but it's ended up becoming like a women in radio podcast, which I'm not mad about because I think this stuff needs to come to light. People don't understand why are women leaving radio so quickly. And there's things that are going on behind the scenes that people aren't aware of because we're not allowed to talk about it, or it's, you know, taboo to talk about pay. How dare you? No, that's so uncouth when it's reality. I mean, we're trying to feed our kids and make rent, and we can't because we're getting less than anybody in the building. So,
I mean, air talent is already underpaid to begin with.
Yeah.
And I always hate that dirty language of, oh, you can make more with endorsements and remotes. And I'm like, oh, so I can make more with more work.
Right, exactly. On top
And
of the
then
work,
also,
that I'm already doing.
Yeah, so I can make more money, but I got to do more work. And when it comes to endorsements, then I got to get a salesperson to actually sell it.
Right.
And they don't like to sell things unless it pads their pocket.
Right.
That was always one of the dirty little radio secrets that I never really liked. I mean, there are so many small things that pushed me out. But the pay was definitely a big one. The way corporate is running a lot of these smaller markets. But then I also know with like the way things are going right now, I was going to lose the ability to end my career on my terms. I don't want to end my career by somebody else making that choice and me not being able to have closure and say goodbye.
Yeah.
So that was also another big driving force.
Yeah. And that just goes again to what you said, that we need to, management needs to know your commercials aren't getting sold just because of the music on the station. Your commercials aren't getting, your endorsements obviously aren't getting sold. People aren't buying spots in order to have endorsements just because of the music. And I wrote this whole long thing before about how when radio first got started, the on-air staff was the celebrities. I mean, they were mingling with like the Rat Pack back in the 50s and 60s or whatever. They were all friends. And because you knew where the talent was, and this isn't like a pat on the back, but we've lost that somewhere. I remember in the 80s growing up and listening to the local legends, and they were, you know, back then they were celebrities, and then all of a sudden just kind of went away. And I don't mean like we need to be the celebrities and we need to be treated as such, but we need to be compensated.
Right.
For what we're doing. Yeah.
And I think the corporations really need to realize how important the talent is. And you bring up a great point. I remember the radio station I grew up listening to, legendary radio station in Minneapolis, Minnesota, KDWB, for anybody who knows. I even interned there when I was in college. And one of their jocks, who was the evening shift, PM drive, phenomenal talent. Oh my gosh, he was so good. Idolized him. He was just pure talent. And he was still in Minnesota when I left and came to Illinois. And when I left radio and I flipped on Sirius XM, somehow I landed on one of the stations on Sirius XM, and I'm listening, and then I hear this voice, and I'm like, I know this voice. This sounds like the guy that I grew up listening to. It's Tony Fly, for anybody who knows. And I was like, this sounds like Tony Fly.
That's awesome.
I'm listening, and he finally says his name, and I'm literally in my car screaming, and I'm shocked because at that moment, I felt like home.
Oh, I got goosebumps. You gave me goosebumps. That's amazing.
Personality did that. Personality made me feel like I was at home. And radio corporations are forgetting that. And they need to remember that, because that's what your talent does, is they make you feel like you're at home.
That is such a great point.
When I listen to Sirius XM, that's who I usually listen to, because I grew up with him, and he's such an amazing talent.
If you could find his email, you should email him that, because if somebody said that to me, I think I would just start crying. That's such a good point. I think I want to end it on that, because I think that's what we need to remember is what the on-air talent can do for a person. So that's really
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. I know you're so crazy busy, and this week was insane with the tornadoes and all the stuff that you've been involved in. I can't even imagine. But
Yeah, the tornado was a tip of the iceberg.
I'm sure it just flooded after that. But thank you so much. And hopefully we can talk to you again down the road and get more into maybe women in radio and what needs to be changed. Because I would love to deep dive into that, maybe with you and some others, and kind of have a little panel. I think that would be really cool.
Yeah, that'd be totally fun.